All right, we want to thank Mark Hayward, the Rhode Island District Director from SBA, for joining us. Mark, I don't know how you're even getting 2 seconds of sleep, but your information has been invaluable, and we thank you very much for being with us today to help us answer some questions, understand more about what's going on and how this is all working. So it's all yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Lauren, and thank you to the Central Rhode Island Chamber for inviting me today. I'm happy to do this. I have not done very many chambers, I will tell you that. So, but Lauren, you've been a long-time friend, and the Central Rhode Island Chamber is very special. So here we go. So you can go to the next slide. Thank you very much. So on the SBA website, if you go to coronavirus relief options or COVID-19, you'll see that across the bottom there are 4 particular programs that the agency is standing up at this point in time, and all that will benefit the small business community. Next slide, please. So the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Emergency Advance, this was part of the CARE package. So CARE's allowed for, and I'll get into PPP, but right now we're going to talk about the Emergency Advantage. If you have not applied for an Economic Injury Disaster Loan, or if you have prior to March 30th, you need to go back into the system, and you should be applying online to a very simple, very easy platform. And at the end of the request, it will say, that's after you put all your information in, it will say, do you want to receive an advance of up to, very important, those 2 words are very important, up to $10,000, and then you would check yes. You would put your bank name, the bank account, the routing number, and off it goes, and it would go into the queue. Some people have already applied for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, period. This is additional because it was set apart in the CARES Act, which just passed a little over a week ago. So a lot of people have asked us, what's going to happen? Am I going to get $10,000? And the answer to that is maybe, which is, I'm sure, what everybody wants to hear. But it's really going to depend upon the number of employees that you have, and because it's really destined for payroll. And yes, it is a forgivable loan, so it turns into a grant. And I will give you at least some information as we go to the PPP, because it does relate to the PPP as well. Next. The Paycheck Protection Program is the program that everybody's talking about. Congress has authorized and funded $349 billion. That's with a B to the agency. As many of you have seen, this money continues to flow. While from an approval process, I cannot give you the exact numbers. All I can tell you is that thousands in the multiples have been approved here in Rhode Island, and the hundreds of millions of dollars have also been approved. Now, the Paycheck Protection Program was meant for very specific reasons, and as I go through this, I'm going to read a couple of areas of the interim final rule that will be helpful to you, and I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of questions about that. So you would take all of the people that you have on your payroll. You cannot go over $100,000 of compensated cash disbursements to any one individual, and then we're going to talk about what you add to it. And on page 10, it says, what qualifies for payroll costs? So payroll costs consist of compensation to employees whose principal place of residence is the United States, in the form of salary, wages, commissions, or other similar compensation, cash tips or the equivalent based upon the employer record or past tips, or in the absence of such record, a reasonable good faith employer estimate of such tips. So that is all the cash. That's cash that you pay to your employees. So none of that can be over $100,000. But it goes on to say, payment for vacation, parental, family, medical, or sick leave, allowance for separation or dismissal, payment for provision of employee benefits consisting of health care coverage, including insurance, premiums, retirement, and payment of state and local taxes. You notice federal was not in there. Compensation to employees, and I need to move this just for a second. For an independent contractor or sole proprietor, wage commissions, income or net earnings for self-employment or similar compensation. So it's very specific as to what they're talking about. And I got a lot of questions, and basically, so let's say that your compensation to your employees is $70,000. When you add up all of the benefits that you're paying for your employees, which I just listed there, that's $30,000. So it would end up being $100,000. So you need to add the two together. And I know a lot of the people on the call, as well as small businesses around the state, they're using the 941s, they're using QuickBooks, they're using the other payroll information that they get from their payroll company. And I think that's really important, because that evidence is what you're going to need to take to the bank. So in addition to this, we're going to do a little calculation. And the calculation basically is, you have 100,000, you have 10 employees, so your basic payroll for the year is $1.2 million. You take that $1.2 million and you multiply it, you divide it by 12 to give you 100,000, and then you multiply it by 2.5, or $250,000 at the end. What is that for? That is for your payroll for the next 8 weeks, right? It's $100,000 a month, plus there is $50,000, the 0.5, that's to be used for ongoing expenses for the business, which can include interest, not principal on notes, interest on notes. It can also include any utilities, any rents, any contracts, internet, and that $50,000 must be spent for that. When you come back to the lender that's provided you with the loan, you're going to give evidence of 75-25. 75% of what you received has been expended towards employees and employee cost, and only 25% has been expended towards the other ongoing costs for the business. Now, here comes the issue that I get questions about this all the time. I'm closed. I'm not allowed to open by virtue of the order of the governor. That's correct. Bring your people back on your payroll. That's exactly what this is all about. This is Paycheck Protection Program. Many of the people who are on your payrolls have been, and I use the example a lot of restaurateurs, and we all go to a lot of the same restaurants, and both in the city of Warwick and Central Rhode Island, no matter where it is. And some of us have been going to places for over 20 years, and the same person has waited on us for 20 years. That's part of your family. Same thing if you're in the manufacturing industry. They're part of your family. There's somebody that you've had for a long time, you've trusted them, and you've employed them. So that's when you bring them. You don't want to lose those employees. You want to bring them back. You bring them back on your payroll, and you pay them. And what I'm finding that small businesses are having a difficult time wrapping around their head is, I'm paying for somebody who's not working. And that's correct. We're going to take them off of unemployment. And with the grace of God, within the next 8 weeks, when everybody's up and running, they're already on your payroll and you're already moving. And that really is the bottom line of the Paycheck Protection Program. I think it's lost on a lot of people, but I think that that's one very important thing that you need to consider as you are bringing your people back. Now, I was on a conference call yesterday with Congressman Cicilline and Congressman Langevin. The issue of the $600 came up. And I thought Congressman Cicilline put it very succinct. He said, listen, we're not here to make money off of the hardship that we are currently suffering under the coronavirus. And remember, the unemployment pays 55%. You also don't get benefits. So he made the point abundantly clear, and so did a small business owner right after him, saying, listen, if you're asking your employee to come back on your payroll, and they say, no, I'm going to stay on unemployment technically, I believe you should notify the Department of Labor that you've offered the job back and they haven't come on. And then it would be a question whether or not they're eligible for unemployment at that point in time. We want to get as many people off of unemployment. We want to make sure that they're on your payroll so that within these 8 weeks, as I said, by the grace of God, you'll be able to just open up the doors and continue. No, nothing's ever going to be the same. We know that. None of us have ever gone through this. I called this at one point in time 9/11 and the financial crisis and multiply by 5. This is something new to all of us. Lauren, can you go to the next slide? So SBA also provided for an express bridge loan if you're waiting to get your money from your participating lender, and just about everybody in Rhode Island is doing these loans. Then you can get a bridge loan from your lender until your loan disperses, and basically what we would do is take the bridge loan out. Next slide. You can go to the next slide. So the SBDC, we are on full tilt here in Rhode Island. We have engaged the SBDC at the University of Rhode Island. They are certainly working with us. Their number is on the screen, and I'm sure Lauren will post the numbers on the Central Rhode Island website. In addition to that, the next slide should be SCORE. There are partners who are also mentoring and counseling people as we go through this situation. And the final one is the Center for Women in Enterprise. And they are also working with a number of firms, both male and female, and I think everybody is as stretched as they can. We want to get as much information to people as we can. The phone number here is 401-528-4561. The easiest way to get a response from us, which is checked more than twice a half hour by Joan and Matt and Ryan and Alana and Katie and Dan here in the district office, is Rhode Island, and that's _DO@SBA.gov. Rhode Island _@SBA.gov. Lauren, I hope that was a reasonable explanation of what is out there right now. I know that there are a lot of questions that I can't answer, but I will do my best to answer the questions that are put before me.
So I'm going to unmute everyone. And if we don't all go at once, if you need to raise a hand, if there's too many chatting, we'll do there. We have a question that came up asking, how will the EIDL loans be calculated, and how is SBA going to analyze gross revenue, cost of goods, operating expenses we filled out on the online application? So that's the start for that.
I'm sorry, it ended up getting gobbled for that.
How will the EIDL loans be calculated? How is the SBA going to analyze the gross revenue, cost of goods, and operating expenses that they put in their online application?
You know, that is, thank you for stumping Mark. We're going to play Stump Mark. I do not play in the disaster side of this. Those calculations are done strictly on the disaster side of it, and I really could not tell you how they come up with that. I wish I could.
All right. They're also wondering, might they be contacted for additional financials to be uploaded, and when will this analysis be done and loan amounts be approved, and when should they expect the funding? I know that's a whole lot at once. And if you're not going to ask, you're free to mute yourself so that we don't have feedback, and then unmute when you wish to speak.
So and I'm assuming that that's related to EIDL. And again, EIDL, while we did hear that there would be an initial funding coming out today or tomorrow, and I've got some additional information from people on that. I don't know, because I can only see so much in E-Tran, and I'm not seeing that right now, so I have to wait until I can see it.
No, I won't be able to get them.
Okay. Other questions that people have, you can put it in the chat. You can unmute yourself and ask yourself directly, whichever you'd prefer.
I have a question for Mark. It's Lauren McNamara from the East Providence Area Chamber.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi. The city is offering $5,000 or less loans to the businesses, and we were wondering, is that going to affect anybody that's applying for any of these EIDL loans? Can they apply for more than one loan if it's from a different entity?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be careful as to. I mean, they can apply to the city. That's not an issue. It's the federal loan. On the federal loans, you can apply both from the PPP as well as the EIDL loans, but the issue there is you cannot receive funds for the same purpose. So if you're receiving funds from, and let's just use the example of the EIDL advance, which is going to be converted to a grant.
Right.
That will end up getting put with the PPP loan.
Mhm.
And the so instead of getting a 250,000 PPP loan, it'll end up being 260,000 because you already received the 10,000 or whatever denomination that you've received, because that can be considered to be a forgivable loan.
Okay.
There are people out getting additional loans. They're using lines of credit, but it doesn't have an impact on what the agency is offered through the CARE Act.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Mark, it's Phil. How are you?
I'm doing okay, Phil.
Hey, as one friend to another, God bless you, my friend. I know you're working your tail off, and I can't tell you how thankful we are to have you and your entire staff at the helm of this.
Thanks.
Just
Appreciate
great
that.
job. Try to breathe, all right? Quick question for you. Did the PPP last Friday. I got to compliment everybody. The turnaround was incredible. Had an approval within about 48 hours. So, I mean, it really went very, very smoothly. My question relates to the acceptance of the expenditures on the other end for the forgiveness. Any idea at this point, has there been any guidance laid out for what SBA is going to be looking for evidence that it did in fact go to payroll, it did in fact go to the accepted expenses on the other side of this?
Again, that's going to be a self-certification under penalty of perjury, but you're going to have to be succinct. And I'm assuming you file 941s, or you have a payroll company that does that?
Yes, that's correct.
So that documentation is going to be needed. And on the side where the 25% Phil, you're going to need at least bank accounts, statements to show, give evidence to the fact that the 25%, whatever it is, was paid for the ongoing operations of the business. And I don't think it's going to be as stringent as people think it is, but please keep good records. I say that all the time. Please keep good records.
Thank you. Roger that.
Mark, we have another question. How is loan forgiveness calculated for a sole proprietor? And what if they have a loss?
I'm what do you mean, what if they have a loss? I'm not following. So a sole prop or an independent contractor or an S corp would take, in some instances, take a draw. Is that correct? Is that what they're talking about? So we're looking at compensation. So they're saying they have no compensation?
Diane, can you clarify what you're looking for? And we'll go to the next question and then come back. What happens if the end of the 8 weeks, we are not back in business? The loan has been used.
Mm-hmm.
Do those employees now have to go back out on unemployment?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball here, but we're hoping no. But remember, what we're talking about is we're talking about the 8-week period, and I can't. So after the 8-week period, hopefully everybody will be back to work, and if they're not, I'm sure that adjustments will be made accordingly. You have to spend the money that you were provided with in accordance with what you agreed to take the money for, which is payroll and the ongoing operations of the business. So you have to do that. And everybody's saying, well, do I file the Monday after the 8 weeks is up? And the question to that probably is no, because you're going to need some time to get your information. This is done with 100% guarantee to the lender at full faith and credit of the United States government. I don't foresee issues unless individuals who took 100,000 only spent 70,000, and then the split was not 75-25. That's why we keep mentioning that. Bring your payroll, bring your people back. You bring in. We know basically what you submitted, and if you're doing that over the period of time, then everything should end up being fine. That's good records, and I think Phil said this. If you got good records, then we're in good shape.
So when did they start counting? You talk about the 8 weeks.
Yeah, they'll count upon disbursement of the loan. or the signing of the note and disbursement of the loan.
And if one employee opts not to come back, but you hire another employee in their place, how does that impact it?
Yep, you've hired the employee. You're now equal to the number that you started with.
Okay.
And hopefully you'll be spending the same amount of money at that you had originally anticipated.
And if that employee that you hired to take their place does not, because of skill set or level of what they've come in, do they need to give them more money? Is it the number of employees, or is it the dollar volume of the payroll that they need to measure for the forgiveness?
So on the forgiveness, it is, that's a good question because I haven't seen that side of the equation. I want to check on that. I believe it's number and dollars, but I want to check. I'm not sure.
Thank you.
I'm
And
not
in terms of forgiveness, is
Yep.
it a sliding scale, so to speak? Can it be partially forgiven, or is it all or nothing is the question?
No, it can be partially forgiven, and then it would roll into a loan with 1% over a 2-year period.
Okay. Let's see what else. So if the loan is based on net income and the
Mhm.
following year there is no income, how is the forgiveness calculated?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
And we'll
The
get
loan
some-
is based on employees and employee salary.
Does DLT work share figure in with the PPL?
I don't know.
We have a question. Do we need to maintain a separate bank account for these funds to prove they were dispersed, or will it go by our current payment records?
I think it would go by your current payment records. I know I have heard that others, excuse me, are trying to set up something separate, but it's not required.
Okay. And as far as tipped employees calculation, would we pay them their average weekly pay, including tips, for the same time frame that we used?
Yes.
Other
And in that, and what I've read, just excuse me, what I read was cash tips are equivalent based upon the employer records of past tips. In the absence of such record, a reasonable good faith employer estimate of such tips.
Okay. Is there anyone's question I missed?
I'm reading from the interim final rule.
I have a question, Lauren.
Go ahead, Paul.
We've been talking about employees' compensation. Does any of this apply to business owners?
Are you an employee?
No, I own a business. This is Paul Wyrostek, Mark. How are
I
you?
know who it is. I know who it is. So you're telling me as the business owners, you don't take a draw.
I understand. Okay, so that's the answer. You don't take a draw.
No.
No.
I asked you. You're telling me you don't take a draw. If you take a draw, then you're considered to be. So this is, and I think this is where a lot of people are reading too much into this.
Mhm.
So it says very specifically for an independent contractor or sole proprietor, wage, commissions, income, or net earnings from self-employment or similar compensation.
S Corp.
Self-employment or similar compensation.
So it doesn't need to be a paycheck, is my understanding, Mark, but like where he'd get
So-
it on a K1 would show his compensation for how he took money out of that business for the year for himself.
Yes, and then you would go through the calculation. What are it cannot be over 100,000. You must then add back all of the healthcare coverage, insurance, retirement, and then you take that, you divide it by 12, you multiply it by 2.5.
Yeah, okay, I understand that, Mark. Thank you. My biggest part of the question was, there's an owner of the business capable of taking money out from this PPP program.
Again, it's self-employment and similar compensation.
Okay, so an S Corp is self-employment, I take it.
So you file as an S Corp, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say you can take it, and what I'm trying to read to you what we have on the interim final rule. I will tell you that everybody has been considerably adjusting to the interim final rule. I've not seen where an individual who took a draw was denied.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Other questions?
Hey, Lauren, how you doing?
Hey, Patrick.
Hey,
County
Lauren,
Cork Irish Pub, Mark.
hey, Mark. First of all, thanks very much for your help. We really appreciate it. It's
No problem.
using for us. So I put an application with Citizens. That's the bank we use for the PPP loan. They got back to me and said that the ones we filled out are no longer valid, that we have to resubmit them. And the number that we came up with was just payroll. I did not add my utilities into it.
No, you're not adding utilities.
We did. Okay, so we did it right. So we did just payroll for our employees.
Yeah, so the automatic calculation of the 0.5 is assuming that 0.5 is for utilities and ongoing expenses.
Okay, that's the number we got. And we filled out the application. We submitted it to them. They said the one that we submitted is no longer valid. We have to resubmit it. This was Friday, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they have an online app that their citizens, I don't know.
They said they were going to send me a link when so this new app comes out, and then we can go on it and refile.
It's up online. You can go on it now.
Oh, they did? Okay.
Yeah, it's up online.
Okay.
What is it?
So the hard copies are no good. You have to do it online?
Every lender is different.
Okay.
So Citizens is doing an online application.
Yes.
What is it?
Okay. All right. I'll go back onto the website and see if I can find it.
Okay.
Okay. If you have a problem, just send me an email and I'll get you in touch with somebody at Citizens.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We have another question. Is the 25% over payroll that's used for the rent, for the utilities, for the other expenses that they anticipate, that 0.5, going to be forgiven as well?
Yes.
Any other questions? You can unmute or you can put it into the chat room.
Can I mute myself?
No, you can't mute yourself because I can unmute you. Sorry, doesn't work that way.
We've been trying to do that for years, Mark.
I'd like to hear Mark's answer again regarding, we have several technicians, Mark, that are currently laid off, and they volunteered for a layoff because two of them have newborn infants at home. So they were worried about, contamination with the virus and all that.
Yep.
And another fellow has an immune system deficiency, and he's very susceptible. So they are laid off. So if they decide to stay on layoff, we contact who to let them know?
So
in other words, you mentioned we had to contact an agency to let them know we offered them to come back on the payroll.
So here's the, so if they're immune deficient or they have other issues that requires them to be, are you a business that can be up and running according with the governor's decree?
Yeah, we are still running. Yes, we are. We're considered essential.
So what we're saying is that you could actually bring them on. They could still remain at home and you could pay them.
That I understand. If they choose to stay on.
Paul, you're asking questions. I would recommend you consult counsel. I can't give you advice on that.
And we can give you Paul, I'll send out, when I send the confirmation for everyone attending, there will be some contact numbers in there as well. And DLT has some options for individuals either coming off employment or that need to go out short term while you're still open regarding TDI and TCI and which would be most applicable in your situation. So that will be included in that email for you.
Very good. Thank you.
And the question raised, Mark, is Schedule C individuals The loan is calculated and forgiven. They'd like you to just go through that once more.
So the way, if we're talking about a draw, is that correct?
Yes, Schedule C, so that they're not on a formal payroll check.
Right. So let's assume that it is that it's $100,000 total between draw and benefits. You would do the same calculation. You would divide that by 12. That would be 8333. You would multiply times 2.5. And then we would be talking about $20,383, I believe, or 23,000. Yeah, 23,833.
And do their taxes, the state taxes or the self-employment tax, get added into that as well? And what about the health insurance?
Yes, health insurance is in that. That's part of the calculation.
Perfect. In terms of the 25% or that 0.5 that's considered for other expenses, is there a list anywhere, or is it just in that interim final rule in terms of what goes in it? Internet, phone, gas, electric, cell, those types of things.
So on page 15 of the interim final rule, it says, how can PPP loans be used? The proceeds of PPP loans are to be used for payroll costs as defined in the Act. 2, costs related to the continuation of group health care benefits during the period, paid sick leave, paid medical leave. That actually may apply, Paul, to the people that you're talking about. You bring them back, you're going to pay them sick leave or medical leave or family leave and insurance premiums. So that probably is exactly what Paul was talking about. Mortgage interest payments, but mortgage prepayments or principal payments are prohibited. Rent payments, utility payments, interest on payments of other debt obligations that were incurred on or before February the 15th, 2020, period.
Okay. Is there any reason someone would not be approved for the PPP or for the EIDL loan?
I've never got these questions before.
Leave it to Central Rhode Island Chamber. That's what we're here for.
I can't answer that question. Laura.
Okay. We also have some offline questions that I received.
Sure.
How is the money that's forgiven or that you get from either the PPP or the EIDL taxed?
I don't believe it is.
Okay. And if,
And again, I don't know. You're asking technical questions. I'm talking about how you get the money.
okay.
I'm not talking about what happens after.
When should we expect, if we receive the funding for the PPP or the EIDL, to receive a communication regarding what documentation will be required on the reporting on the back end?
We're very hopeful that we'll have that out very soon. Right now, it's, I mean, basically you're talking about the 941s and any other additional information that you have as it relates to the expenses that I just talked about. I hope that we'll have additional guidance out soon. And I think Secretary Mnuchin said on numerous occasions that this is a evolving process. It is out. People are applying for it. Billions of dollars are being committed. The Senate tomorrow will consider the president's request for an additional $250 billion for this program. And I mean, I can only give you the information I have right now. And when we get more information, Lauren, you're on, I believe you're on my daily.
I am. Yep.
That I send out to the lenders. Today I talked about the change in which just about includes everybody.
And I know the time frame for the EIDL changed from what they had hoped and initially when it was rolled out. Is there any thought on how long between when somebody applies and when they're apt to hear something regarding their application?
I am very hopeful that it will be this week. I certainly was on calls with the administrator, and it was our hope that this would be done soon.
Terrific. Any other questions?
Yeah,
Okay.
Lauren,
Yeah.
I have another question for you. If we go online, we apply, we get approved, we get the money. When do we tell our employees go off unemployment and we're going to start paying you? Once we receive the money?
I would believe so, yeah.
So if I get a check, say, for example, on Thursday, I can call everybody and say, we got a loan.
I
go
mean,
off
for your
unemployment.
own, I mean, everybody's accounting is a little bit different.
Yes.
So, I mean, let's just say that your payroll begins on Sunday.
Yeah,
I don't actually, think that there's a problem with it beginning on the Sunday if it's a few days later.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
But so you're saying within that week, when you get it, the next pay period starts, we should start paying them and tell them go off unemployment.
I believe so.
Okay, so if it takes a week to get the money, they're on unemployment for a week. If it takes 4 weeks to get the money, they're on unemployment for 4 weeks until we get the money.
Yeah, the purpose is, and they're trying to push out as quickly as possible,
Get people
as many dollars as they possibly can to get people back off of unemployment.
Yeah, unemployment. Okay, thank you.
I had an offline question that was raised. If I receive the funds next week and they understand that they're closed, can they wait 2 weeks before they bring them back? Is there a time frame where they have to start using the money?
I can't answer that.
Okay.
There is a time frame where it has to be expended, but if they're going to wait 2 weeks, I don't know. Remember, there is a magic date of June 30th.
Mm-hmm. And
Fine.
to qualify that this is not regarding lost revenue that you've lost now, but that the calculation is figured based on your last 12 months of income in terms of the PPP and what you can submit for, not lost revenue that you've lost now. Is that correct?
You're not submitting on income. You're not asking for income. That is not what this program is about.
Perfect. Paul, you had another
Hey, Mark.
question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Paul, I think you had another question.
Yeah. The question I had was, okay, you're getting money to pay these people their salaries for 8 weeks. Okay, they come off unemployment. Now, business hasn't rebounded to where it was, and you have to lay them off again. What happens?
I don't have a crystal ball, Paul.
No, I understand that. I'm just wondering if there's a penalty
A penalty for what?
for having to lay them off again in 8 weeks.
Okay, this program deals with 8 weeks. This program deals with the Paycheck Protection Program from point A to point Z. It is for 8 weeks to bring people back onto your payroll. The questions you're asking go far beyond my ability to provide an answer. I'm only dealing with the Paycheck Protection Program over that period of time.
Okay, but just thought I'd ask.
Hey, Mark, we're talking a lot about bringing people back off unemployment. I've fought hard to not have to lay any of my employees off and dug deep to try and keep them in place, and thus far have done so. What PPP does for me, from my perspective, is it will help to enable me to not have to get to the point of laying them off. There's no penalty for approaching it from that light, right?
No, I mean, basically for the next 8 weeks, you're continuing them on the payroll because you're avoiding the separation.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's eligible.
Okay. Because my goal was to try to avoid ever putting them on unemployment. I've fumbled through the last 4 or 5 weeks, but my goal here is to avoid having to get to that point.
Yeah, and I understand. We've heard a lot of other small businesses with the same situation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Tony, you have a question?
On the certification side of that, Phil, is people say, well, they're still being employed, and I'm not sure what question that is, but if you have to answer it, say if I have to go another week, I'm going to have to lay them off. So I mean, you need to, on your assertion,
right,
on page, I think it's on page 2 of the application. It's very clear, and you can certainly put that in there. And we see that where a lot of people have made yeoman's tries to keep everybody up and running. That's essentially what you would say.
Correct. Thank you.
Hi, Mark. Tony Guarnacha. Just a quick question. So what I want to do is try to stretch these dollars as far as possible. So I wanted to ask about the 25%. So my understanding is during the 8 weeks, you can't decrease it more than 25%. How is that calculated? Is that based on per payroll periods during the quarter? Like, how is that calculated, the 25%?
Tony, so Lauren, I have 14 minutes. Can you restate that, because I'm not understanding where you're going with that.
Okay, yeah, from the documentation I got and read, it said loan forgiveness will be reduced if you decrease salaries or wages by more than 25%. I was just wondering how that's calculated, because I want to make sure this stretches as far as possible. So, if I took a pay cut of 25% or 20%, how would that be calculated? Would it be on per payroll period? Like, how would the documentation go? Is it just a matter of how much?
I don't know where you're reading from.
That was on the frequent asked questions. There was like a checklist that went along with the loan statement. So that's why I read it for the PPP program.
All right, I would have to go back, Tony, and I would have to reread that.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I got, because I got a packet from Bank Rhode Island, and that's what was in that packet.
Okay.
And we only have 4 minutes, so if anyone else has questions, we need to let Mark be able to prepare for his next call at 2. Other questions? While we have him, captive audience, now's the time to ask.
Mark, once again, thank you very much. Appreciate all your efforts.
Thank you. Thanks for your help.
Yeah, I mean, I have to confess, somebody sent me an email about a week ago and says, don't you regret that you didn't retire on 12/31/19?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's been a long few weeks. I got on a call this morning. I'm not looking for sympathy, and I actually did not know what day it is. And myself and the staff, I'm the only one in the office. Nobody is allowed in the federal building without ID, and there's very few people in the federal building. And I come in the office generally between 4 and 4:30 in the morning. And we will continue to go until about 10 o'clock at night. And I know that the staff is doing the exact same thing. We are trying to diligently serve the people of the state of Rhode Island and the small business community. We do not have all of the answers. I don't have all of the answers. I continually every night ask questions of Washington with the hope of getting additional answers. And some nights we get them, some nights we don't. And we're getting as much information to you. I'm not the expert in this. I have read it numerous times, but I hope that all of the answers that I gave were correct. But if they're not, I would ask, if you're concerned about it, to fact check me as well.
Mark, we thank you. Rhode Island thanks you. We are very lucky to have you as our representative and getting us our information. I thank all of you for joining us. You will receive a confirmation email with links. If you have additional questions, please reply to that, and we will do our best to get you the answers. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Condolences, Mark.